Betrayed after 17 years, a man walks away from his crumbling marriage when his wife, Clarissa, replaces him with Reed, a smug criminal. Unbeknownst to her, he's an undercover FBI agent who's been tracking Reed's money laundering empire for years. Her betrayal hands him the final piece to unravel Reed's schemes. As FBI raids expose the truth, Clarissa's world collapses under the weight of her choices. With Reed in cuffs and Clarissa facing probation, the man embraces his true identity, stepping into a new life of purpose. What secrets will his next case uncover? Love this gripping tale of betrayal and justice? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more heart-pounding stories that spark curiosity and connection. Your likes, comments, and shares fuel our passion to bring you diverse, thought-provoking content. Join our community, stay curious, and help us keep the stories coming. The sound of Clarissa's laugh, sharp and cold, echoed in the hallway as I stood in the entryway of the house I'd worked so tirelessly to build. She barely glanced at me, her back straight, her voice almost mechanical as she said, "No divorce papers needed. Just leave." Her words struck like a final nail in the coffin, and I felt the weight of it. 17 years of marriage, reduced to nothing more than a dismissal. Reed stood next to her, grinning like a man who had just claimed his prize, already at ease in a home that had once been ours. His muddy shoes were planted carelessly on the coffee table I had crafted myself, the wood now scarred with marks that would never fade. I fought the surge of frustration rising in my chest, that tight, burning knot, but I said nothing. What was there to say? The decision had already been made. Turning from them, I climbed the stairs with deliberate slowness, each step measured, though my mind was anything but calm. In our bedroom, the faint scent of her perfume lingered, a floral, sweet memory of simpler times when I had thought I was her everything. I didn't let myself linger on that now. Instead, I went through the motions, packing my clothes with meticulous care, folding each shirt, each pair of pants, making neat stacks, my hands busy, my mind numb. Downstairs, I could hear them, their voices mingling in the air, her laughter, his loud, arrogant drawl. I heard Reed comment on the house, as though it were his own. "Nice place. Could use some updating," he said with a chuckle, as if he had any say in what I'd built, as if he knew anything about it. The insult stung, but I held my tongue. I zipped up my suitcase, the finality of it resounding in the quiet of the room. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, Clarissa was leaning against the kitchen counter, sipping from a glass of wine. My wine, the one I had bought for our anniversary just last month. She didn't even look up as I passed by. Reed was sprawled out on the couch, flipping through TV channels with the kind of careless ease that made my fists clench. They were in my space, in my life, and they had no idea who I truly was. I stopped at the front door, hand on the knob, and let my eyes sweep over the house one last time. The pictures on the wall, us at the beach, us at her cousin's wedding, stared back at me. Frozen memories that felt more like ghosts. 17 years of my life thrown away for this man. I could have screamed. I could have demanded an explanation, but what was the point? She had already checked out, already made her choice. I was nothing to her anymore. With a quiet exhale, I opened the door and stepped into the night. The air was cool, the silence only broken by the distant sound of crickets. I tossed my suitcase into the back of my truck, the engine sputtering to life, and I pulled out of the driveway, my hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Clarissa thought she had humiliated me. She thought she'd won by tossing me aside like yesterday's news. She had no idea who I was or what was coming. I drove, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror, and a strange calm settled over me. Not anger, not anymore, but something sharper, something colder, something far more dangerous. She wanted me gone? Fine. I would leave. But this was far from over, not by a long shot. A few miles down the road, I pulled into a gas station under flickering fluorescent lights. My phone buzzed heavily in my pocket, and I pulled it out, the screen bright in the dark. The number I scrolled to was saved only as command. My thumb hovered for a moment before I typed out a single message. Initiate. Subject confirmed. Proceeding as planned. I hit send and leaned back in the seat, letting the silence swallow me whole. The reply came almost instantly. All teams ready. Phase 1 begins 0900. I read it twice, letting the words settle deep inside me. 17 years of pretending. 17 years of lying, of playing the part she wanted me to play. The quiet husband. The guy who fixed the sink and paid the bills. She never asked questions. She never cared enough to wonder about the late nights, the business trips, the locked drawer in my office that she wasn't allowed to touch. And maybe that was the problem. I wasn't just leaving the house tonight. I was leaving the lead I had lived for her. As I merged onto the highway, the world outside stretched dark and empty, save for the occasional headlights of passing cars. I thought about what Clarissa had said, her voice so sure, so dismissive. No divorce papers needed, just leave. The way she laughed like I was nothing. The sting of it stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. 17 years and she tossed me out like a forgotten coat. And Reed? His face kept flashing in my mind, smug, arrogant, his feet on my coffee table as if he belonged. But I couldn't get lost in the anger. Not now. There was too much to do. I glanced at my phone again. The screen was still yet, the message I'd sent glowing back at me. Initiate, subject confirmed. Proceeding as planned. The reply was as cold and final as I felt. All teams ready. Phase 1 begins 0900. It was real now, no turning back. I had always known this day might come, but I never imagined it would come like this. My wife, kicking me out, handing me the perfect opening, the perfect reason to walk away. She thought I was just a boring accountant, some guy in a cubicle, crunching numbers for the government. That's the part I'd played for her all these years. I let her think it was true. It was safer that way. She didn't need to know the truth. The late-night meetings, the classified files, the bruises I'd come home with, bruises I blamed on tripping down the stairs. The road stretched out before me, dark and quiet. I turned off the highway after an hour, heading toward a place I hadn't visited in months, a safe house tucked deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. The Bureau called it a black site, a place where agents like me could lay low when things got messy. The gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled up to the cabin, a small shack with a sagging porch and a rusty mailbox. Perfect cover. I grabbed my suitcase and stepped out into the cool night air. The crickets were louder here, their chorus a steady hum that drowned out the noise in my head. Inside, the place was sparse, just a couch, a table, and a few other necessities. It wasn't much, but it didn't need to be. I had more important things to think about now. The flickering light of a single lamp cast its weak glow on the bare walls. The room was stark, cold, nothing but the essentials. No pictures, no personal touches, just a space to exist in. My bag thudded to the floor beside the door as I checked my watch, just past midnight. 9 hours until phase 1. I pulled out my phone, ensuring the signal was good, full bars, of course. Everything had to stay connected. I'd spent too many years in the shadows, too many years in silence, to let a single detail slip now. I sank into the couch, my head pressing back against the threadbare cushions. My eyes trailed over the cracks in the ceiling, each line like a scar, marking time. This wasn't the life I'd imagined at 45. It wasn't even close. A safe house. A cold, empty safe house. My marriage in ashes, my wife gone, shacked up with a sleazeball who had no idea who I really was, what I really did. Clarissa thought she knew me. She had no clue. She'd never seen the man who had built this life in the shadows. Not the agent who'd watched every move she made, who'd kept her safe from the truth, even when I had to lie through my teeth. I told her I worked for the Treasury Department. Some desk job, tracking budgets and tax forms. Not a total lie, not really. Vague enough to keep her off the scent. She'd roll her eyes when I mentioned work, muttering something about how dull it sounded. Spreadsheets, coffee stains. I'd laugh playing along, pretending it didn't eat at me every time she said that. She never knew about the burner phones, the encrypted emails, the unmarked vans I sat in for hours, watching targets through binoculars. She didn't know the last 3 years of my life had been consumed by a man like Reed, a money launderer, a criminal mastermind disguised as a wealthy hedge fund manager. She had no idea. No idea that her so-called soulmate was the very reason I was sitting here in this cold, empty room. I stood, my boots thudding against the floorboards. The safe house was small, no frills, just enough to keep me alive. A tiny kitchen in the corner with a sink, a stove, a fridge that hummed too loudly in the silence. I opened the fridge, grabbed a can of soda, cracked it open, and took a long, deep sip. The fizz settled in my stomach, but it did little to calm the tension in my chest. Tomorrow. Tomorrow everything would change. 9 a.m., the teams would move in. I could already see it in my mind. Black SUVs pulling up, agents streaming out, knocking on the door. Clarissa would be confused at first, maybe even sleepy. Then panic would set in, sharp and sudden. She wouldn't know what hit her. Neither would Reed. I almost smiled at the thought. Almost. Back on the couch, I pulled out my notebook from my suitcase. It was old, beaten up, the leather covers scuffed and worn from years of use. Inside, my notes were a mess. Codes, dates, names, nothing too obvious. Enough to jog my memory when I needed it. I flipped to a page toward the back where I'd written RV months ago. Reed Vallon, Red Vein. I'd been watching him long before Clarissa had ever met him, long before she decided he was her ticket out of our marriage. I tapped the page with my finger, staring at his initials. Clarissa thought she'd humiliated me tonight. She thought she'd won, but she had no idea. The game had already started, and I was the one holding the cards. I set the notebook down and checked my phone again. No new messages. Good. Everything was on track. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. The safe house was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the occasional chirp of crickets outside. Tomorrow, everything would kick off tomorrow. Clarissa would see a side of me she never expected. I wasn't just the man she'd kicked out. I was the man who'd been waiting for this moment, planning for it, building it, and now it was here. I finished the soda, crushed the can in my hand, and tossed it into the trash. Then I lay down on the couch, my arm under my head. Sleep wouldn't come easy tonight, but I didn't care. I had work to do. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The cold woke me, a chill that seeped into my bones, settling in deep, making me wish I'd packed something warmer. I'd barely slept, maybe 2 hours on the lumpy couch. My mind had been too wired, too active to allow any rest. The clock on my phone blinked 6:47 a.m., just over 2 hours until phase one. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and watched the first light of dawn creep through the dusty blinds. The safe house was still as a tomb, the only movement the faint stirrings of morning light. My suitcase was still by the door, the notebook still open on the table, staring up at me with Reed's initials. Today was the day. Today he'd go down. And Clarissa, whether she knew it or not, she'd go down with him. I stood and stretched, my back cracking from the stiff cushions. The air smelled like old wood, damp and musty. Home for now. I walked to the kitchen, filled a chipped mug with water from the sink, and drank it down in a single gulp. No coffee here. But adrenaline was already coursing through me, sharp and steady, waking me up in ways sleep never could. I checked my phone again, an update from command. Teams in position, rendezvous 0800, black safe, confirmed secure. Good, everything was moving as it should. I sent back a quick copy, en route. Then I grabbed my boots, my keys, and headed out. The morning air was crisp, sharp against my skin. The woods surrounding the cabin were silent, save for the chirp of a few early birds. My truck sat where I'd parked it, its windshield frosted with dew. I climbed in, started the engine, and let it warm up, wiping the glass clear with my sleeve. The drive to the rendezvous point wasn't far, about 20 minutes to a warehouse on the edge of town. An SP spot, a place the Bureau kept off the books. I pulled onto the gravel road, the tires crunching underfoot in the stillness. My mind drifted back to last night. Clarissa's laugh, Reed's smug grin. 17 years. 17 years of building a life, a home, and she'd thrown it all away without a second thought. But that wasn't what had kept me up. It was the irony of it all. Her new boyfriend wasn't some random guy. He was my target. I'd been working Reed Vallon's case for 3 years. 3 years of late nights, fake identities, Tangled financial records that made your head spin. He was a hedge fund manager. On paper, he looked like every wealthy businessman. Fancy suits, slick hair, and a yacht that he bragged about at parties. But underneath it all, he was dirty, laundering millions through offshore art deals and crypto scams, moving cash for people who had no business in polite society. I tracked him across state lines, tapped his calls, watched his every move. Then, 6 months ago, Clarissa brought him home. "This is Reed," she'd said, all smiles, like she'd found gold. My soulmate. Soulmate. My mark. I never told her, of course. I couldn't. My real job, the one I did in the dark, depended on secrecy. She thought I was just some government pencil pusher. And I'd let her, I didn't care. It was safer that way. The less she knew, the less she could screw it all up. But I never thought she'd get caught in the middle of it like this. I pulled into the warehouse lot at 7:58 a.m., parking beside a row of black SUVs. Didn't Rowan was already there, leaning against his vehicle, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Morning, sunshine," he said, flicking ash onto the ground. "Rough night?" I shrugged. "You could say that." Inside the warehouse, Director Keller was waiting. He was older, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who didn't waste words. A table was set up with laptops, maps, and a stack of files, Reed's life in paper form. "You sure about this?" Keller asked, glancing over his glasses. "She's your wife." I didn't hesitate. "Was." He nodded, no judgment, just facts. Rowan clapped me on the shoulder. "Let's bury this bastard." Free either. Gunmetal dawn filtered through the clouds as if the sky itself had been holding its breath for this moment. I didn't smile when Rowan cracked his usual grin, but the heat lit up in my chest, unmistakable and rising. This was no longer about Reed Valon, the money launderer, the smug bastard who stole my wife and laughed doing it. No, this had gone deeper, tunneled into the marrow. This was personal. When we rehearsed the plan one final time, every step mapped, every second accounted for. Surveillance teams were already in place, their vans tucked into suburban shadows, cameras trained on the target house. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m. and we'd hit. One team would breach the house. Another, already closing in on Reed's downtown office, would sweep in simultaneously. Servers seized, accounts frozen mid-transaction. The case was an iron fortress, clean chain of custody, digital trails, financial statements, and even a recorded phone call where Reed, with the arrogance of a man who thought himself untouchable, bragged about laundering cartel money like it was a clever bar trick. I had built this case grain by grain, year after year, and now it was time to raze it all to the ground. Director Keller tossed me a headset with the offhand weight of a man who trusted me to hold the line. "You're on comms," he said, gravel in his voice. "Watch the feed. You call it if things go south." I nodded, slipping the earpiece in with practiced ease. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. This was my element, what I'd trained for. I glanced back at the screens. Clarissa's car was parked in the driveway, nestled beside Reed's glossy, black BMW like a snake coiled beside a deer. They were inside. They had no idea what was about to descend on them. Clarissa never knew this side of me. To her, I was the quiet one, the man who sometimes forgot trash day, the one with too many late nights and too few words. She never saw the locked briefcases, the late calls in coded language, the sting operations I orchestrated with the same precision others reserved for symphonies. She never saw the man who faced down armed traffickers without blinking. And she certainly didn't know that her perfect, golden boy had just handed me the final piece I needed. Reed walking into our home had sealed his fate, and maybe hers too. I climbed into the van with Agent Rowan, the metal doors slamming behind us like a judge's gavel. The glow of surveillance screens spilled across the interior, illuminating Rowan's face and mine in ghostly blue light. Clarissa's house, the house that had once been ours, filled the screen from two angles. Curtains drawn, still as death. 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes. The hum of tires on asphalt filled the space between us. Rowan muttered something about traffic delays on the northern perimeter, but I barely registered it. My eyes were locked on those screens. I didn't let myself think about what they were doing in there. tangled in my sheets, her breath against his skin. I crushed the thought like glass under boot heel. This wasn't about them. This was the job. 8:55 a.m. 5 minutes. I adjusted the headset. The soft static in my ears sounded like a storm waiting to break. Rowan leaned forward, checking calibration on the live feeds. I sat back, steady, watching the front door of the house I once called home. The driveway, still and silent. My name was gone from the mailbox, but my fingerprints were all over what was coming. They thought they'd won. Clarissa thought last night's performance, her laughter, the sharp edge in her voice as she told me to get out, was the end of my story. But she didn't know the pages I'd written in secret. She didn't know I'd been building to this. The implying the eye at the radio buzzed to life. Team Alpha in position, came the clipped voice. Team Beta, office site secured, awaiting green light. I inhaled once, deep and clear. Go. The moment snapped into motion like a tripwire. On screen, 3 unmarked SUVs screamed into the cul-de-sac, black paint gleaming like a blade. Agents spilled out in synchronized motion, weapons drawn but lowered, their vests emblazoned with the golden block of FBI. Torres, leading Alpha, one of my oldest field partners, took the porch like it belonged to him. Bang! Bang! FBI, search warrant, open the door! Silence, just for a heartbeat. Then the curtain shifted. Clarissa appeared, blinking against the morning light, her robe tied loosely at the waist, hair sleep-tousled. Her face was a storm of confusion and dread. She cracked the door open. What's going on? Her voice trembled. Torres didn't hesitate. FBI, step aside. He moved past her like a wave, the team flowing behind. Clarissa stumbled backward, clutching her robe tighter. Then, Reed. Barefoot, shirtless, hair askew, he barreled down the stairs, adrenaline surging in his eyes. What the hell is this? He barked. And then he saw the badges. All the color drained from his face. He turned to run, a mistake. 2 agents were already at the rear entrance. He didn't make it 5 steps. They tackled him to the hardwood with mechanical efficiency. Click. The sound of handcuffs was clean, final. Reed Valon, an agent intoned. You are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, and wire fraud. Reed's mouth moved. No words came. Clarissa was screaming now. On screen, she whirled in the foyer, her voice jagged and raw. What the hell is going on? Somebody tell me! The agents didn't answer. They didn't need to. They moved through the house like surgeons, flipping cushions, seizing laptops, opening drawers with latexed hands. Clarissa collapsed onto the couch, dazed and shaking, her voice reduced to gasp as she watched her world get dissected in real time. On the second monitor, Reed's office was a hive of activity. The sleek, sterile suite, floor-to-ceiling glass and chrome, was being dismantled piece by piece. Agents unplugged servers, boxed files, sealed off financial networks with swift commands. His staff looked on, stunned, helpless. Office secure, Beta team crackled through. Evidence in hand, moving to processing. Copy, I said, my voice flat. Alpha status. Subject in custody, secondary occupant detained for questioning. Secondary occupant. Clarissa. The camera lingered on her. An agent was seated across from her now, asking simple questions she didn't know how to answer. I don't know anything, she repeated, the words tumbling out in desperation. This is my house. You can't do this. But we could. We did. 3 years I'd worked this case, every lead, every late night, every time I told her I was working late. All of it had led to this moment. Rowan nudged me, his smirk barely contained. She's losing it. I didn't smile. Her collapse wasn't victory. It was just inevitable. Then, a discovery. On screen, agents pushed aside a bedroom painting, one I had hung once upon a time. Behind it, a safe. They cracked it. Inside, bundles of unmarked bills, a burner phone, and papers. Too distant to read, but too damning to ignore. Clarissa saw. She paled, staggered to her feet. That's not mine. I don't know what that is. Maybe she didn't. But complicity doesn't require awareness. She took Reed's gifts. She played house with him. She opened the door, figuratively and literally. That made her part of it. Reed was shoved into the back of an SUV, drenched in sweat now. Arrogance bled out of him. "I want my lawyer," he kept saying, as though those words were a shield. They weren't. Not against what we had. Rowan checked the office hall. I asked, "Enough to bury him?" He grinned. 20 years. Maybe more. I nodded. On the monitors, the raid wound down. Audience packed up the last bags of evidence. The house looked like a war zone, drawers gaping, pillows slashed, closets eviscerated. Clarissa sat like a broken doll, head in her hands, tears streaking down her face. An agent offered her a tissue. She didn't move. "This can't be happening," she whispered. But it was, and I was the one who made it happen. She asked the question quietly, her voice barely more than a breath. "Where are you taking me?" "To the station," the agent replied, his tone clipped. "We've got questions." Silence settled over the van like a thick fig as the last echoes of the takedown faded. The operation had been tight, clean, efficient, unforgiving. No loose ends. Agent Rowan, ever casual in the face of aftermath, retrieved a pack of spearmint gum from his coat pocket and offered me a piece. I took it without a word, the cool bite of mint cutting through the lingering adrenaline on my tongue. He studied me for a moment, his eyes sharp beneath his usual smirk. "You good?" I nodded once. "Yeah." And I was. This wasn't about vengeance, not anymore. It was about resolution, about justice, about seeing the long dark road I'd been walking for 3 years finally reach its end. Clarissa didn't know who I really was, not after all the masks and in a distance, but she would, very soon. The van jolted as it rolled forward, the city outside waking in shades of steel and muted amber. Glass towers blinked to life, commuters stirred on the sidewalks, and sirens sang in the distance like some urban lullaby. Phase 1 was over. The dominoes had begun to fall, and I was the one who'd set them toppling. The warehouse came into view, its nondescript bulk nestled between forgotten lots and tired alleyways. Inside, the team was already deep in the rhythm of post-op, cartons of evidence stacked high on metal tables, agents combing through laptops, ledgers, burner phones. I removed my headset. The screens in front of me were dark now, their flickering ghosts gone. Rowan tapped the steering wheel, humming something soft and off-key. Reed Villain was in cuffs, his sanctuary ripped apart. Clarissa had been hauled in, stunned and trembling, and yet my chest clenched, not with fear, not even with guilt, but with the weight of seeing her face flash across the surveillance feed, bewildered, tear-streaked, broken. She hadn't recognized me, not behind the gear, not behind the betrayal, but recognition was coming. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I already knew whose name would be there. Clarissa, missed call, another, then a text. "What did you do?" All rhymes, no punctuation, no breath. As if she were screaming into a void. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering just above the reply. A beat, then two. Rowan glanced over. "She's melting down," he said with a half grin. "Let her sweat," I muttered, sliding the phone back into my pocket. But it buzzed again, relentless. We pulled into the warehouse lot. Inside, it buzzed like a hive. Evidence was everywhere, paper trails, encrypted drives, and Clarissa's glittering illusions. The gifts, the records, her name dancing across account summaries like a signature she never meant to leave. Director Keller waved me over. "Clean job," he said, his gravel voice tinged with rare approval. Veins tapped. "We've got enough to bury him." I nodded, eyes scanning the spread. Reed's empire disassembled into evidence bags and folder tabs. One piece, then another. Years of surveillance and sting work, all converging in this single satisfying wreckage. "What about her?" I asked, voice low, detached. Keller shrugged, in holding. "Says she didn't know a thing. We'll see." My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Answer me." I pulled it out, stared at it. I could picture her now, alone in some stark interrogation room. Walls too white, chair too cold, everything unraveling. Her fantasy life dissolving into transcripts and mugshots. Still, I didn't type. Instead, I opened my camera roll. There it was, a photo from months ago. Me and Rowan in full tactical gear. The surveillance feed behind us showed Clarissa's face, caught mid-laugh on one of Reed's tapped video calls. I hadn't meant for it to be anything more than a training record. But now it was proof, a mirror, a reckoning. I sent it to her. No caption, no context, just the image. The phone rang instantly. Her name blazed on the screen. I let it ring twice, then answered. Yeah, I said flatly. Her breathing hit me first, ragged, panicked, like she'd been running in circles. What the hell is that picture? She demanded. What did you do? I leaned back, watching an agent seal another bag of Reed's fake invoices. You said no paperwork was necessary, I replied coolly. You were right. She started to protest, her voice rising, frantic, but I ended the call before the words could land. The silence that followed felt sharp, precise, a cut, clean. Rowan sauntered over, gum popping between his teeth. She get the memo? She's getting there. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Man, you're ice. Cold. No, this wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. After 17 years of being invisible, of listening to her sigh through dinner, roll her eyes at the bland man she thought she'd married, I wasn't about to spell myself out now. She could connect the dots on her own. Director Keller summoned us into the briefing room, a small, stark space with a whiteboard and looping raid footage on mute. He pointed to a thick file. Valon's already talking, trying to make a deal. I didn't flinch. Of course he was. Guys like Reed always cracked when the power went out and the bars came down. What's he saying? Keller flipped open the folder. Says the wife knew, says she helped with the gifts, the accounts. He's throwing her under the bus. My jaw tightened. She didn't, I said, and she's not a player, she's a passenger. Keller raised a brow but didn't argue. We'll dig. See what sticks. And there it was. Truth tangled in perception. Clarissa had taken the money, the car, the villa in Mykonos she bragged about like a prize. But she didn't know. Not really. She thought Reed was just generous, stupidly rich, not criminally so. She wasn't sharp enough to orchestrate a laundering web, not discreet enough to cover tracks that precise. But ignorance doesn't erase fingerprints. 140 grand traced directly to her. And that villa, not a timeshare, a shell company front. She was deep in it, even if she never meant to be. My phone buzzed again. Another call. I silenced it, let it drift to voicemail. I could already hear her in my mind, pleading, accusing, collapsing beneath the truth. She'd get her answers, just not from me. Not yet. Keller handed me a paper cup of coffee, black, bitter, the kind that cuts through sleep. I sipped. It burned down my throat, waking something. You're off the field for now, he said. Paperwork, then we regroup. This one's high profile. Media's already circling. I nodded, fine by me. My part was done. The agents filed out, scattering like embers to the next fire. I stayed. The whiteboard still bore Reed's name scrawled in black beside a growing list of charges. My marriage, what little remained of it, had finally shattered. Not with a scream, but with a click, a photo, a hang-up. Last night she thought she'd thrown me out, exposed me. But she had no idea who I really was. Now she was beginning to. The photo I sent wasn't just a reveal, it was a confession. This is me, the real me. The man you never looked hard enough to see. She'd call again. I was certain of it. Maybe next time I'd answer. But for now, I let the quiet settle. My coffee had cooled, but I drank it anyway, the bitterness keeping me grounded. The warehouse was almost silent now. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The door creaked open. Rowan leaned in. Interrogation starting. Director Keller's gums snapped like a Starster pistol. Sharp, impatient. Valon's cooling his heels in room 3, he growled, the cadence of his voice as hard-packed as the mint he kept crushing between his teeth. I rose from my chair, joints protesting after the night we'd had, and my boots hammered a hollow tattoo along the concrete corridor. Rows of agents hunched over glowing laptops and split evidence bags lined the passage. The smell of burned coffee mingled with printer toner and stale adrenaline. At the corridor's dead end waited the interrogation suites, featureless gray coffins with one-way glass and chairs bolted to the floor. I paused at the observation window and stared in. Reed Valon slumped at the steel table, wrists cuffed, Armani traded for regulation orange. Stripped of his swagger, he appeared shrunken, greasy hair plastered to a damp forehead, eyes flicking around the room like a rat searching for a crack in the wall. Inside, Agent Torres flipped through a folder, unhurried as a surgeon before the first incision. "You've got plenty to tell us, Reed," he said, voice even, unmoved. "Let's hear it." Valen leaned forward. The cuffs clinked like distant chains on a ghost ship. "I'll talk," he blurted, words tumbling over each other. "But I need a deal. I'm not the whale here." Torres didn't blink. "You're the man in cuffs. Start talking. Maybe we'll listen." Valen's Adam's apple bobbed. "It's Clarissa," he began, venom hiding behind forced sincerity. "She knew everything. Helped set up the accounts, the jewelry, the car, her idea. Said we had to look respectable." My fist curled until the leather creaked. Clarissa couldn't balance her own checkbook, let alone launder millions, but Valon kept spinning silk from cobwebs. "She's got a safe deposit box downtown. Check it. Proof's inside." Torres jotted a note, head still, eyes unreadable. "We'll see. Anything else?" Valon's desperation gleamed like sweat. "The villa, Clarissa chose it, said it'd be our escape hatch. She's in this neck deep." I turned from the glass before my teeth cracked. Agent Rowan slid beside me, one brow arched in wry amusement. "He's pitching her overboard fast," he murmured. "Yeah." My jaw ached. "Won't float." Clarissa had grabbed every bauble Valon dangled, worn the diamonds to charity galas, parked the imported coupe in our own driveway, crowed to her sister about a villa in Mykonos. Greedy? Absolutely. Mastermind? Not on her best day. The Bureau's paper trail already pinned $1.4 million in dirty assets to her name, enough to haul her in even if she'd been asleep the whole time. I inhaled through my nose and padded back toward the briefing room, lungs craving air thinner than the stench of lies. My phone buzzed. Mike, the lawyer who spoke in sentence as direct as punches. "She wants to see you," he said, without preamble. "Clarissa called my office from holding, says it's urgent." "She's booked?" "Not arraigned yet, but the gears are turning. She's scared, wants to talk." I rubbed the bridge of my nose. The headache blooming behind my eyes pulsed in time with the overhead fluorescence. "Set it up." "You don't have to." "Do it." Call ended. I stared at Valon's open file, the man himself still flapping in the next room, trying to trade oxygen for freedom. The safe deposit box was smoke. The villa, though, real as sunrise. We'd traced it weeks earlier, a $2 million cliffside shrine purchased through a shell company Valon controlled. Clarissa thought it a love letter. We knew better. Evidence, deed, and digital breadcrumbs, enough to snare her tight. Mike texted the appointment. Bureau conference room, 2 p.m. I spent the hours sorting evidence, serial noted cash, burner phone logs linking Valon to offshore accounts, until my mind clicked into a calm, surgical rhythm. At 1:45, I slipped into the city, engine growling beneath me. Bangkok traffic pulsed, horns, motorbikes weaving, street vendors hawking noodles in the blinding heat. The Bureau satellite office loomed ahead, a slab of concrete and tinted glass that reflected nothing but a grim scar. An agent escorted me to a beige interrogation room. No cameras, just a table, 2 chairs, and the stale aroma of old carpet and cheaper coffee. I sat. Moments stretched thin, then the door opened. Clarissa entered. No cuffs, but her posture shackled by dread. Hair tangled, mascara smudged, her designer robe replaced by jeans and a hoodie several sizes too large, like borrowed skin. She froze when our eyes met, lips parting, then shutting. "Sit," I said, voice level. She sank into the chair, hands laced tight. "They say I'm involved," she whispered. "I didn't know, I swear." I kept silent, let her words swirl and settle. Her gaze sharpened, accusatory. "You did this, the raid, his arrest. This was you." I nodded once. "Yes." Tears pooled. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" "You never asked," I replied, tone flat as winter stone. "You never cared. The simplest truth often wounds the deepest." Clarissa stared, tears spilling unchecked. I remained still, an immovable witness. I cared, she insisted, voice as fragile as spun sugar, brittle under her own doubt. I didn't know it was FBI raids. You said you were an accountant. I told you I worked for the government, I said measured. You filled in the blanks you preferred. She shook her head, rapid, as if motion could undo reality. That's not fair. You hid it. You lied. I leaned forward, palms flat on the cold laminate. I didn't lie. I protected you until you let Valon in. Her face crumpled at the name. I didn't know what he was, she whispered, staring at her twisted fingers. He was kind. He listened. You were always distant. The word struck, dull but accurate. Years of late nights, classified phone calls, walls built to keep her safe, had also kept her out. I'd patched roofs, paid bills, endured her endless retellings of brunch gossip, yet never invited her into the chambers of my real life. Eventually, she'd stop knocking. You wanted a soulmate, I said softly. You found one. Her sob broke free, wow and shaking. Shoulders quaked as she tried to breathe around grief and regret. I, I, I didn't mean for this, she choked. The money, the villa, they were just gift. I didn't know they were. Her fingernails scraped faint half moons into the cheap laminate tabletop as she whispered, they say I could go to prison. The fluorescent tubes above us hummed, throwing a jaundiced light over Clarissa's tear-streaked face. She had always sworn she hated yellow lighting. Now it painted her desperation for everyone to see. I kept my back against the chair, arms folded, pulse steady. I can't save you, Clarissa. The words slid out, cool as steel, no apology hidden inside them. Your signature appears on the accounts, the deeds, the transfer orders. You helped Reed Valon launder every last crooked dollar, whether you solved the math yourself or not. She shook so violently her earrings rattled. But you know I'm hopeless with numbers, she protested, voice rising, echo bouncing off beige drywall. I didn't understand any of it. You have to tell them that. Silence, wide, merciless, settled between us. I let the seconds stretch, the way Rowan once taught me during interrogation training. Space is a vice. Finally, I answered quieter than before. If you're clean, proving it won't require me. If you're not, well. I let the sentence hang, shrugged once. Clarissa stared as though my restraint were a slap. After 17 years, you won't even try my? Memory flickered, 100 shared breakfasts, 1,000 small quarrels, her laughter when my omelet collapsed in the pan. But recollection was only static. It could not change the present broadcast. You told me to leave, I reminded her. No divorce papers necessary, remember? My tone was flat, factual, like reading a lab result. She winced as though the syllables were shards of glass. I didn't mean this. Her shoulders folded inward. Mascara carved black tributaries along her cheeks. I was stupid, angry. Please. She reached across the table. Her fingers, ice cold, brittle, found mine for a heartbeat. The door rasped open. A rookie agent with the buzz cut and clipboard hovered in the doorway. Time's up, he announced, eyes skating over the scene. She's due back in holding. Clarissa's panic sparked brow white. Wait, she lunged, clutched at my hand again. Don't let them take me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Slowly, deliberately, I extracted my hand. Choices have consequences, I said. These are yours. The rookie's gesture beckoned. Clarissa rose unsteadily. Mascara, tears, and regret pooled beneath her lashes as she allowed herself to be led away. At the threshold, she twisted for one last plea. I never understood you, she rasped. I should have. The door clicked shut behind her, vacuum sealing the quiet. I stared at her empty chair until the metallic taste of adrenaline faded. She claimed she had never truly seen me. True enough, I, on the other hand, knew her every sigh, every impatient glance past my shoulder. Data points cataloged over years of undercover constraint. Still, recognition had arrived too late for both of us. Metal legs screeched across linoleum as I stood. The hallway outside felt meat locker cold, despite midsummer heat beyond the concrete walls. My phone buzzed. Mike, my blunt-edged lawyer. She's a wreck. You good? I thumbed back a single word. Yeah. then pocketed the device and walked. The bureau warehouse brooded on the river's industrial fringe, all corrugated steel and sodium lights. Afternoon sunlight ricocheted off rust-dappled shipping containers as I guided the truck inside. Heater rattling, window cracked. I drove through the yawning bay door and parked beside mountains of seized evidence. Rowan spotted me first, gum popping like a firecracker. "Valon's sentencing just posted," he said, thrusting a folder into my hands. "Judge pushed it fast, 22 years. Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. Boom, done." Pages fluttered as I flipped them. Reed had tried bargaining, snitching, blaming Clarissa. Anyone saw him. But wiretaps, bank records, and 3 years of my undercover sweat had tied a neat bow around his empire. I closed the folder. "Good," I murmured. Rowan leaned on a crate. "And Clarissa?" 3 years probation, I said, plus a court-mandated finance ethics course. He whistled low. "Lucky, considering the villa, the diamond bracelets, that cherry-red convertible. Lucky isn't the word she'd use today." I unscrewed a bottle of water, swallowed. "Greed writes checks the soul can't cash," Keller liked to say. Muted televisions along the wall cycled headlines. "Wife of undercover FBI agent caught in high-profile sting." My own name scrolled beneath, though I'd refused every interview request. I never joined this outfit for the bylines. Director Keller lumbered over, glasses perched halfway down his nose. "Press is chewing on the story," he muttered, jerking a thumb at the screens. "You sure you won't give a statement? Makes the Bureau look shiny." "Media's got enough glitter," I replied. "I'm done talking." He studied me a breath, then nodded. "Fair. You earned the quiet." A fresh manila envelope, thicker than the last, landed with a slap. "Next case, whenever you're ready." He tromped off, leaving the scent of stale coffee in his wake. I didn't open the envelope. Instead, I drifted among evidence tables stacked with the Reed's former life. Cash counting machines, offshore bank ledgers, designer watches. Mid-pile, I spotted a picture frame. Clarissa and me on a beach 5 summers back. Sun-dazed smiles, gulls wheeling overhead. Sand clung to her hair. I had my arm around her waist like it belonged there. I traced the photo's glass with my thumb, felt nothing but a faint echo of salt air. Carefully, I set the frame face down. Rowan watched from a distance, chewing thoughtfully. "You okay, partner?" "I'm finished," I answered, not an emotion, just a status update. Dusk deepened by the time I rolled out of the warehouse. City traffic pulsed, neon signs blinked awake. In the driver's mirror, sodium lamps cast twin comets of light along the truck's flanks. The heater still rattled, a broken percussion line underscoring every thought. Clarissa's voice replayed. "I'm sorry," apology as incantation, wielded too late to stave off judgment. She would move in with her sister now, trade valet parking for bus transfers, spend evenings studying spreadsheets and ethics slides in some community college classroom. Meanwhile, Reed Valon would count the years by institutional breakfast, gray oatmeal, weak coffee, until his release date in 2047. Justice was rarely poetic, but sometimes its arithmetic satisfied. My own ledger felt lighter than at any point in the last 3 years. Reed's syndicate lay dismantled. Clarissa's illusions lay in shards. The only weight remaining was memory, and memories weigh only what you let them. A stoplight glowed red. I rested my wrists on the steering wheel, breathing in the city's mixed perfume of diesel and river mist. Maybe tomorrow Director Keller would expect me to crack open that thick envelope and start again. Another name, another cover, another set of criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. For tonight, though, the road ahead was clear. The sunset stretched like melted copper across the skyline, and my hands, steady, unshaking, remained firmly on the wheel. Vibration rattled against the metal work table, tickling my palm. Mike, ever vigilant attorney and professional warrior, had texted again. "The press won't quit. You still stonewalling?" I tapped back. No comment. Let them tire themselves out. His instant popped up like a miniature order signed and sealed, and I slid the phone into my pocket just as the cavernous warehouse exhaled its final breath of the day. Agents peeled away from evidence crates, jackets shrugged back on, radios crackling out their last instructions. The operation we'd commandeered for weeks was shutting down, dust motes drifting through pale evening shafts like confetti no one bothered to cheer beneath. Agent Rowan sauntered toward me, gum wrapper pinched like a spent secret between two fingers. He lobbed it into the trash, missed by a mile, and never slowed. "Beer?" he asked, one eyebrow cocked at an angle that promised trouble. "Squads claiming a booth, celebrating your grand unmasking." The notion of a cold bottle and roaring laughter felt like oxygen after months of breathing through a straw. I pictured condensation sliding down green glass, imagined the ache in my cheeks from honest laughter. "Count me in," I said, voice steadier than I expected. He grinned, quicksilver, and together we drifted out into a sunset trembling with burnt orange and violet bruises along the horizon. 3 blocks later, the dive bar materialized, all buzzing neon reds and blues, sticky floors that yanked at shoe soles with each step, the air humid with hops and long-soaked wood. Agent Torres already held court at a corner table, her laugh sharp as broken ice. A couple of techs lounged beside here, and even Director Keller, stone-faced patriarch of our misfit family, nursed a whiskey the color of rusted metals. They erupted when I crossed the threshold. "To the man who clipped Valen's wings," Rowan shouted above cracked speakers pumping classic rock. Glasses collided midair, splashing foam like celebratory gunfire. I let the corners of my mouth curl, just enough to taste unfamiliar lightness. Reed Valon was in a cell, Clarissa had chosen her path along silkier sins, and I remained here, spine unbowed beneath fluorescent bar glow. I let that first beer hum through my bloodstream, dulled edges smoothing, voices of my colleagues turning warm and generous. No aliases, no lies. For the first time since undercover life tangled itself around my marriage, I inhaled without calculating who was watching. Hours loosened. The bar drifted from raucous to mellow until only Rowan, Torres, Keller, and I lingered, stubborn embers refusing to snuff out. Last call rang like a distant foghorn. I pushed away a half-finished second beer, savoring its sharp kiss, then settled the tab amid whirring credit card machines. Outside, night rolled in cool and velvety. I filled my lungs, sensing distant sirens, a cab's hiss along slick asphalt, the collective heartbeat of a city that never truly dozed. Headlines would fade, phone calls would die. Tomorrow I would pry open a fresh file and dive headfirst. Tonight I walked the quiet streets alone, discovering the gentle click of independence in every footstep. 7:30 hums on the battered alarm clock dragged me out of sleep. My new apartment, downtown shoebox with blank walls and ambition, felt like a half-finished sentence. Mattress on bare floorboards, boxes gaping with ignored obligations. A window blind crooked enough to throw sunlight directly at my throbbing eyes. I groped for the phone, one message from Rowan. "Good night, team still buzzing." I smirked, tossed the device onto an unpacked sweater, and shuffled to the kitchen. Coffee maker, still entombed, I commandeered a dented pot, boiled water on a stove that protested with pops, and stirred in instant grounds that tasted of scorched earth. Leaning against the counter, mug cradled in both hands, I studied the street. Taxis wove through morning traffic. Commuters clutched paper cups. Skyscraper glass reflected dawn like sheet metal, catching flame. The house I once shared with Clarissa, seized. The sun-drenched villa in Mykonos, where Reed laundered charm and cash, auctioned. Restitution funds for victims, the agent said. I felt no tug to reclaim a single chipped plate from that life. Another buzz, Director Keller this time, office, 9 sharp. Promotions official. Steam coiled from the mug as a grin tugged at my face. Head of covert financial crimes, fast-tracked after Valen's implosion. 17 years undercover, and now I'd helm the very machinery that once consumed me. I showered under lukewarm jets, water pricking skin awake, then tugged on clean jeans and a collared shirt. No suit armor required for ceremonial handshakes. Keys jingled as I locked the door behind me. 20 minutes later, my truck nosed into the bureau's steel and glass monolith, fluorescent lights flickering overhead like perpetual interrogation. Keller's office perched on a corner, Glein sprawled behind him like a conquered kingdom. "Sit," he growled, sliding a badge across mahogany. My name gleamed, newly etched. You run the circus now. Choose your people. Chase your ghosts. Guard your budgets. His gaze, flinty yet proud, pinned me. I lifted the badge. Its heft anchored the moment to reality. Thank you, I answered. He nodded once. Don't screw it up. Celebration took the humble form of stale coffee and sugar-glazed contraband in the tiny break room. Rowan twirled a foot-long cruller like a victory baton. To the boss, he trumpeted. Torres flicked a fistful of sprinkles at me. Even the rookies I'd barely memorized lined up to shake my hand. One whispered, half awed, half disbelieving, "You're a legend." I shrugged, bit into a donut that tasted of oil and achievement. Respect had a flavor, and it was sweeter than Clarissa's cautious pecks after Reed's name floated between us. Office upgrade, window view, desk that didn't wobble, a door I could close against the world. On it lay the folder Keller had pressed into my palm. Early intel on a West Coast crypto mogul whose pockets leaked stolen pension money. Fresh hunt, fresh thrill. I opened the file, pages crackling like tinder, and the familiar rhythm of note-taking soothed me. Ink scraping paper, mind parsing clues. The phone buzzed where it lay among paper clips. Clarissa. For seconds I stared at the notification, memory churning. Her courtroom tremble, apologies shaped like broken pottery, 12 months probation and a twin-size mattress added her sister's cramped apartment. Can we talk? I need to say something. Words small yet heavy, as though each carried a regret she'd never bother naming aloud. I rested the phone face down. Work swallowed me again. Stakeholder meetings, authorization forms, a vending machine lunch that tasted like plastic ambition. By dusk, only desk lamps hummed, painting corridors in gold. Leaning back, I watched the city's nightlights ignite, constellations pinned to concrete sky. Opportunity stretched before me, genuine, hard-earned, austere. Yet Clarissa's text tugged like a snagged thread. I need to say something. What remained unsaid? She had chosen Reed Vallon's crooked opulence over our battered vows. She had watched me escorted out of our own home, wrists aching from hidden cuffs of betrayal. I deleted the message with a measured press of my thumb, as definitive as a signature. Choice, after all, was a privilege both of us possessed. I shrugged into my jacket, locked the office, footsteps echoing along linoleum echo chambers. Garage silence swallowed me until the truck's engine coughed awake. City noise rose, a tide of horns and muffled conversations, receding behind me as skyline shrank in the rearview mirror. Clarissa's ruins rested somewhere across town. My own foundations, though raw, were rising brick by deliberate brick. Morning number 2 of my official leadership arrived with merciless punctuality. Traffic moaned below the open window, and the air hinted at summer's iron grip. I dressed faster, muscle memory aligning with new expectations, and arrived early enough to savor the hush of a sleeping office. Papers awaited signature. Requisition requests stacked like dominoes. My badge glinted whenever dawn slipped through blinds, reminding me I'd traded clandestine shadows for fluorescent scrutiny. Rowan ducked in mid-morning, hair uncombed, eyes dancing. You're glowing. Promotion suits you like Kevlar. He dropped a manila envelope onto my desk. Surveillance feed from Phoenix Field Office. Our crypto prince likes private airstrips. I flicked through photos, sleek jets, silver briefcases, smiles too wide to be honest. Adrenaline whispered against my ribs. Lunchtime, Torres appeared, ponytail swishing like a metronome. We're requisitioning a UAV for remote monitoring, she said, sliding forms under my pen. Director Keller already winked. I signed, heartbeat quick. Leading meant trusting them, shaping strategy, but still tasting fieldwork on my tongue. Between tasks, memory of Clarissa's message surfaced unbidden. I allowed it 5 seconds, no more, of mental weight before returning to schematics, budget grids, operational risk columns. Each pen stroke felt like laying mortar. The day wound down, most lights blinked off. My office, still smelling faintly of fresh paint and burnt coffee, cradled me in expectant quiet. I thought of Reed Vallon behind bars reciting threats to a bunkmate who'd never met me. I imagined Clarissa on her sister's threadbare couch, phone outstretched, wondering why apologies echo never earned a reply. I drove home under a star-splintered sky, windows rolled halfway, wind-tousled hair, carried faint street vendor spices, half-heard laughter from balcony gatherings. Every red light pause offered reflection. I had nearly drowned beneath invented identities. Yet here I steered something unequivocally mine. Apartment hallway smelled of varnish and somebody else's stir-fry. Inside, unpacked boxes hunched like mute spectators. I flipped a switch. Amber lights spilled across scuffed parquet. Dinner became takeout Thai eaten straight from the carton, while case files spread across the coffee table. Real furniture still a line item on tomorrow's list. Sleep eventually claimed me sprawled on the sofa, pen still in hand, television murmuring static. Dawn bled peach over rooftops. I jolted awake, neck protesting. Phone buzzed again, this time Mike. Media digging for exclusive. Statement? I typed, still a no. He replied with a predictable understood, followed by legal disclaimers in tiny text. I chuckled. Some things remained constant. By 8 sharp, I strode into the war room, whiteboards already tattooed with schematics of shell corporations. Torres clicked through drone footage on a projector. Rowan balanced coffee on one knee like a tightrope walker. When Keller entered, chatter stilled. He scanned the intel, grunted approval. Nothing more. In our language, that was a standing ovation. Hours later, a courier delivered a sleek laptop, agency issue, encrypted partitions ready for my fingerprints. The intake form required a designation field, handler, lead investigator. I typed my own name, a simple signature that nonetheless felt reverent. No aliases attached. Identity reclaimed. Evening painted long violet streams across office glass. I rubbed tired eyes, pushed back from the monitor. Outside, city lights blinked like Morse code, messages of commerce, romance, petty crimes. The life unfolding in those streets mirrored mine. Chapters ending, foundations rebuilt. Clarissa's silence continued. Perhaps she sensed the final door had closed. I shut down the computer, locked drawers with a new key, and slung my jacket over one shoulder. Corridor lights dimmed behind motion sensors as I walked. In the elevator mirror, my reflection looked unfamiliar. Lighter somehow, shoulders squared not from burden but from purpose. Parking garage echoes accompanied me to the truck. Engine rumbled. Headlights cut twin blades through darkness. I guided the vehicle onto the avenue, cityscape glittering on both sides like an ocean of fractured jewels. This aftermath, hers in shards, mine under construction, wasn't triumph to gloat over. It was simply truth. Choices lay before me. Mentor rookies, dismantle empires of fraud, perhaps one day allow something softer than duty to anchor my evenings. For now, steering wheel warm beneath my palms, badge resting in jacket pocket like a resolute heartbeat, I eased into the flow of midnight traffic. Ahead, the road stretched luminous and unbroken, and I pressed the accelerator with steady conviction, carrying forward everything worth saving, relinquishing what was not. Steam curled from the lid of the paper cup as I shouldered open the glass door. The aromatic surge of real coffee, none of the powdered misery I'd endured during the stakeout years, filling my lungs like a battle cry. A week into the promotion, Monday still tasted bright. From the corner office, my office now, the city unfurled in steel geometry beneath a rinsed clean sky, so sharp it felt like the future had filed its edges overnight. The desk, however, respected no dreams. Folders rose in precarious cairns. At the summit lay the newest headache. Ethan Bryce, crypto conjurer, money washer, art world oracle. I slid off my jacket, draped it on the back of the chair, and let the caffeine scorch a deliberate path down my throat while I leafed through the evidence. Shell corporations flickered across printouts like Ghosts, Bryce Digital Arts, Nephilim Holdings, Solstice Chain LLC, each a dollar laundering sluice disguised as avant-garde innovation. 8 million laundered so far, maybe more. It was only a framework of leads and intuitions, but I felt that satisfying click. The one that it meant the hunt had begun. Silence reigned. No vibrating phone, no late-night pleas from Clarissa. I deleted her last message, and with it the gravitational pull of old grief. Outside my door, the office stirred awake. Ringing telephones, rapid heels, the faint arpeggio of an electric stapler. Agent Rowan appeared, grinning like he'd been smuggling sunshine. "Settled in, boss?" he asked, pitching a neon stress ball. I snatched it midair, lobbed it back. "Warm-up laps only," I said. He leaned against the frame in his customary half-slouch. "Team's chomping at the bit. Young blood wants to gut your fancy crypto shark. 10 o'clock brief. Bring coffee and don't poison it." He saluted, retreating with a low laugh. For the first time in years, I was the one steering, not shadowing. No mask, no double life. Just the work. I nestled into the case files, pen hissing across margins, building the skeleton of an indictment. Suspicious wallets braided through blockchains. Timestamps glowed like breadcrumbs. Reed Valon's downfall had taught me patience. Build slow, stack facts, weave a net so fine the quarry never feels the threads. Clarissa's defection, Valon's betrayal, the courthouse crescendo. All of it had burned the dross away. Now there was only purpose, crystalline and heavy. At 10 sharp, the task force filtered in, Rowan with 2 steaming cups, Iant Torres, vending machine enthusiast, and breaching charge savant, 2 rookies whose badges still smelled of laminate, and Director Keller, gruff as gravel, dropping in to hover like an unspoken deadline. I spun a marker between my fingers and faced the whiteboard. "Target Ethan Bryce," I began, scrawling the name in uncompromising black. "Age 34, Los Angeles. Front business, Bryce Digital Arts. Moving at least $8 million in tainted funds through fake NFT sales. Our mission is eyes on everything. Accounts, contacts, morning's awe, midnight lovers. We do it quiet. We do it clean." Questions ricocheted, jurisdiction, warrants, encrypted comms, extradition options if he bolted overseas. The room crackled. By the time we adjourned an hour later, a full-color spider web adorned the board. Bryce's world dissected into nodes and red strings. That old fire, banked but never extinguished, flared hot behind my sternum. Lunch was a turkey sandwich, devoured over depositions. Crumbs snowed onto evidence photos while I cross-referenced offshore registries. Afternoon dissolved into a chain of calls. Treasury Justice, an IRS cyber forensics liaison in Austin. Each conversation another brick in the cell Bryce didn't know awaited him. Clarissa hovered only as distant static, a couch-surfing exile on her sister's floral love seat, rehearsing apologies I'd stopped collecting. The house, the villa, the shared illusions, they were auctioned ghosts now, headline fodder gone stale. 5:03. I slouched back, vertebrae snapping like knuckles, and surveyed the thinning cubicles. The mug was empty, ambition drained to the last bitter granule. In the break room, Torres was body-checking the vending machine until a chocolate bar surrendered. "Solid first day, Chief?" he asked, triumphant wrapper crackling. "Rock steady," I answered, rinsing ceramic under lukewarm water. "Word is Valon's appealing." I dried my hands, unconcerned. "Let him. 22 years is a long monotone." Torres grinned, tossed the bar in the air, and disappeared down the corridor. I lingered, water droplets ticking from the faucet, imagining Reed Valon pacing a concrete cell, counting grievances instead of millions. Justice could be poetic, but even poetry needs punctuation. Lights off, security badge clipped, I exited into a sunset that bled molten gold between skyscrapers. The stairwell amplified my footsteps, each echo a clean heartbeat. My pickup spluttered awake in the garage, loyal as ever, and ferried me through thinning traffic while a nameless song fluttered from the radio. By the time I reached the apartment, dusk had left lavender fingerprints on the horizon. Inside, the darkness was companionable. I shed boots, holster, the day's residual tension, and poured cold water that tasted almost luxurious. No beer. Clarity held its own intoxication. At the window, I watched humanity scrolling by. A teenager walking a dog too dignified for its leash, a couple debating dinner, a cab gliding toward unknowable drama. Clarissa's last ultimatum resurfaced. No divorce papers needed, just leave. And I almost marveled at her simplicity. She thought walking away won the game. She'd never understood the board. I had kept dignity, purpose, the integrity of a man who had crafted both mask and revelation. The warrant that pinned Reed Vallon like an insect in amber had pinned something else too, my future, finally unshackled from her disdain. The glass cooled my palm as I set it on the sill. In my battered messenger bag, the Bryce file waited, humming with possibilities. Intricate fraud, delicate strategy, a chase sharp enough to slice sleep. I smiled, small, unshowy, but alive, and let the silence settle. The mattress against the wall was no monument, yet it held the promise of undreamed nights. I lay back, hands behind my head, and gazed at a ceiling untroubled by ghosts. Reed Vallon's farewell had been explosive, Clarissa's catastrophic. Mine was measured, resolute, a door closing without a sound. Tomorrow the hunt would continue. Emails traced, surveillance teams dispatched, the digital tide dragged to low ebb. Tonight there was only the rhythm of my breath and the knowledge that I had stepped, at last, onto ground that belonged entirely to me. A gust of wind hissed through the blinds as I sat motionless in the dim corner of the motel room, the glow of the TV flickering across the carpet like a dying fire. My fingers were tight around the burner phone, knuckles bone white, though I wasn't sure if I was gripping it out of necessity or desperation. Outside, the world went about its delusions undisturbed. Inside, I was unraveling. Clarissa's voice still rang in my ears, sweet, measured, rehearsed. "You deserve someone who doesn't lie for a living," she had said before walking out with her suitcase and her silence. That line had stung, not because it was untrue, but because it was true enough. She hadn't looked back, not even when I said her name like it might tether her to me. But Clarissa was already gone, body, heart, and allegiance. Gone to Reed Vallon. Reed Vallon. The name burned hotter than betrayal itself. He ran his empire through polished fronts and bloodless books, laundering money like a Renaissance artist layered oils, delicately, masterfully. We'd been circling him for months, trying to pull the thread without unraveling the whole tapestry too soon. And all the while I hadn't seen it. My wife had been the loose end, and he'd tied it neatly around her. Agent Rowan had warned me weeks ago, in his usual sideways fashion. Some men wear masks so long, they forget they ever had faces beneath, he'd muttered over a half-burnt pretzel in the break room. I hadn't asked what he meant. Maybe I should have. He always saw things just a step ahead, except maybe this. Now Rowan stood across from me, his lanky frame casting long shadows in the lamplight, his voice unusually careful. "The directors greenlit the raid," he said. "We hit Vallon tomorrow at dawn. Torres is coordinating. You in?" My eyes locked onto his. There was no space in me for hesitation. "Not anymore, Sean. I want him conscious when I walk in," I said. "I want him to know who sold him to the feds." Rowan gave a low whistle. "Cold," he said, but nodded, a flicker of something. Approval, pity, maybe both, passing over his face. The hours ticked by like a slow bleed. Mike, my lawyer, called to go over logistics. "You sure you want this all admissible?" he asked. "And once this goes public, your name's tied to everything. Like, that includes the marriage, but I want the truth out," I replied, "even the parts that cut me open." When dawn broke, pale and ruthless, I was already geared up outside Vallon's estate. Torres checked her comms with military precision, her voice crisp as she nodded toward the door. 10 seconds. And in that moment, all I could hear was Clarissa's laughter, how it used to fill a room, then how it hollowed out when she looked at me like a stranger. The door splintered under the weight of the raid. Flashbangs followed, bright, deafening, pure chaos. I moved through it like a ghost with a badge, guided only by a vengeance that pulsed like a second heart. And there he was, Reed Vallon, cornered, cuffed, and blinking through the haze of the morning's reckoning. He looked up. Recognition bloomed across his face like a bruise. "You." I didn't smile. "Me." His mouth twisted, part amusement, part contempt. "You lost her." I stepped closer, low enough that only he could hear. "No," I said, "she lost herself." And for the first time, he said nothing. The cuffs clicked. The silence thundered. And I walked out into the rising sun, every step a burial for the man I had once been.